The man who saw too much. Why the Warren Commission didn't want you to know of him or the repairs he made to the wounds on a murdered president. You probably have little or no recollection of the name Tom Robinson as it relates to the JFK assassination. We have to wonder if that was the intent of the Warren Commission when it published its report on the assassination of President John F. Kennedy nearly a year after his murder on November 22, 1963. Of all the evidence in this author's book, JFK Case Not Closed, that the Commission dismissed, ignored, altered, or suppressed to frame Lee Oswald as the lone assassin of President Kennedy, it's blatantly egregious that Thomas Evan Robinson, seen here in a rare image of him on Dutch TV, is a name you won't find anywhere in the 888-page summary edition of the Warren Report. The only thing more egregious is why the Warren Commission decided to ignore what Tom Robinson saw and did when JFK's body was in his custody, and why it decided that you shouldn't know about it. Tom Robinson was the mortician who took custody of President Kennedy's body after the autopsy procedure was completed in the late evening hours of November 22, 1963. Although there would be no public viewing of President Kennedy's body, his professional task was to prepare the body for burial and private viewing by the president's family. While Robinson embalmed and prepared a body for public viewing or burial countless times over his career as a mortician, this was an assignment like no other. This was the 46-year-old president of the United States, and he wanted the traumatized family members to see John Fitzgerald Kennedy for the last time, appearing serenely at rest, not the victim of a violent death due to a massive gunshot wound to the head. To do so, Robinson would have to meticulously work to reverse the horrific result of massive head trauma and added damage as a result of the autopsy process. There were other small bullet-related wounds on the body, such as the upper back entry wound seen on the autopsy face sheet at right, as well as surgical damage to the body caused at autopsy and emergency treatments by doctors at Parkland Hospital. These were relatively simple to prepare for burial, and most would be hidden by the clothing the president would take with him to his grave. The painstaking work of Tom Robinson required on the gaping head exit wound, which appeared to him as depicted in this artist's rendering, creates an interesting point. No man had closer observations of all the wounds on JFK's body than mortician Tom Robinson. He had to examine all wounds on JFK's body and decide how best to prepare them for burial and/or private family viewing. Given Robinson's access to JFK's body, his expert observations of the wounds and the procedures necessary to cosmetically repair the wounds, you would think that he would be a key witness to the government investigation. However, the Warren Commission did not call Tom Robinson to testify. Instead, nearly 15 years later, he appeared before the House Select Committee on Assassinations and finally spoke about the president's head damage that he cosmetically repaired as a professional mortician. Robinson stated under oath that the massive head exit wound he repaired was located at the lower right segment at the back of JFK's skull, demonstrated here by Parkland Dr. Robert McClelland. At least 45 other medical professionals, such as Parkland surgeon Charles Crenshaw, affirms this location of the blowout exit wound, which forensically corresponds to a shot coming from the front of the car. After Tom Robinson was ignored by the Warren Commission, he was dismissed by the House Select Committee on Assassinations, despite providing this hand-drawn illustration of the location of the head exit wound he cosmetically treated. Why? In this diagram that he provided in 1978, we have the back of the president's head, and it shows what he described as a fist-sized exit wound at the rear of the skull. This wound on the back of the president's head is never mentioned by the Warren Commission or the House Select Committee on assassinations. And again, we have to find out why that is. An exit wound at the back of the head directly contradicts the U.S. government's conclusion that all wounds were caused by this lone assassin, Lee Oswald, positioned above and behind JFK. Robinson's stated position of the fatal exit wound at the back of JFK's head is at odds with official schematic drawings of this wound used by the Commission at left and the House Select Committee at right to claim that Oswald fired the kill shot from above and behind. So in both schematic drawings, 15 years apart, you see the bullet entry wound at the rear of the skull and a blowout exit wound above the right ear, but no mention of a blowout exit wound at the right rear of the skull. And again, these diagrams are completely inaccurate, and we need to find out why they were presented as fact by both panels. Like the two schematics you just saw, this itodox drawing was presented by the House Select Committee as an accurate depiction of JFK's head wounds, showing a small entry wound at the back of the head, not a blowout exit wound at the right rear of the skull. So in the docs diagram for the House Select Committee, there's the entry wound, which is in the what would be described as the cowlick area of the president's head. And over here above the right ear, we have a massive blowout exit wound. There is no mention of a blowout exit wound here at the right rear of the president's head, as described and treated by mortician Tom Robinson. And again, we need to find out why. Yet, JFK autopsy x-rays, as well as 46 medical professionals and mortician Tom Robinson, all establish that the fist-sized exit wound on JFK's head was at the right rear occipital lobe region, as indicated at right in purple. So in this diagram, there's the occipital lobe right here, and the blowout exit wound is described right here in that area. And in fact, Dr. Robert McClelland told the Warren Commission that part of the cerebellum right here in the green was also damaged by this wound, and part of this substance here oozed out of the wound when the president was lying on the gurney at Parkland Hospital. So again, that affirms the location of this wound to the right rear of the president's skull, not above his right ear. Cosmetic repair to a right rear head exit wound was consistent with the rest of Tom Robinson's work because, in his notes detailing his cosmetic repairs on JFK, Robinson said he used wax to plug a possible small entry wound at the top right forehead, covered by the president's hair, to prevent embalming fluid from leaking out. So in this autopsy photo, there's where the wound was that Tom Robinson described. It appeared to be a small entry wound, but the hairline would cover over it. Now, Tom Robinson said that he had to plug this wound here while the president was on the gurney to prevent, during movement of his body, to prevent embalming fluid from escaping out that wound. So all wounds on the president's body had to be treated in some way by mortician Tom Robinson. Another wound Robinson treated for burial was the back of the neck entry wound shown at right. The commission said this bullet exited JFK's throat and went on to cause all the wounds on Governor Connally, giving birth to the single bullet theory, which is necessary for there to be a lone gunman. So in this exhibit here, Exhibit 385, published by the Warren Report, you see the bullet entry wound at the base of the neck, which is higher than the point of exit at the throat just below the Adam's apple. This is necessary for there to be one bullet causing all the wounds on two men, all the non-fatal wounds on two men, as you will soon discover. But Robinson stated under oath that the entry wound he repaired for burial was almost 6 inches lower than the throat wound. His claim is verified by the autopsy face sheet at left and JFK's suit jacket at right, which shows a lower point of entry than the base of the neck. So, there is the bullet entry wound according to the official autopsy sheet, and it's described as being 5 3/4 inches below the collar line and slightly to the right of the spinal column, not the base of the neck right here, where the schematic drawing shows it to be. To validate the official autopsy report, we have the president's suit jacket that he wore that day. And it also shows a bullet entry wound in the upper back that corresponds to the face sheet at left, not the base of the neck here, where the schematic drawing shows it to be. To fit a shot coming from above and behind JFK, the commission moved the upper back entry wound up to the base of the neck to make it higher than the point of exit at the throat for the bullet that continued downward to strike Governor Conley, thus enabling the single bullet theory. If the bullet entry was nearly 6 inches below the collar line, where two autopsy reports, JFK's clothing, and Tom Robinson place it, the bullet would have to exit JFK's throat upward in flight, then make a sudden downward turn in midair to strike Connolly near his right armpit. So here we have the bullet entering where all the evidence places it, 5 3/4 inches below the collar line and slightly to the right of the spinal column. Now, despite not hitting any hard substance like bone or cartilage, the commission would have us believe that the bullet traveled upward so that it could exit the president's throat just below the Adam's apple. And upon exiting the throat, the bullet then continues on a downward trajectory to find the governor's back near his right armpit. And yet the strange part here is that the bullet traveling in an upward trajectory must make a downward turn in midair in order to find Governor Conley. And this is the flight path of what has become known as the magic bullet, and this flight path must be necessary for there to be one gunman, and therefore possibly Lee Oswald acting alone. How are we to explain that Tom Robinson's cosmetic repair of both the non-fatal upper back wound and lethal head wound are in disagreement with the Warren Report's depiction of the wounds on JFK per these official medical illustrations? These illustrations were presented by the Warren Commission instead of using autopsy photos, naturally, to show the audience, the public, where the wounds were on the president. And none of these wounds are accurate, as will be determined in future presentations. And is it a coincidence that the observations and repairs Robinson did on JFK's bullet wounds just happened to refute the Warren Commission's claim that the president was shot and killed from behind by lone gunman Lee Oswald? At a public trial, Tom Robinson's observations and work on the wounds on President Kennedy's body would not have been ignored by Oswald's defense team, leaving state prosecutors the burden of proving that the bullet wounds correspond to two shots fired from above and behind by accused lone assassin Oswald. But with Oswald eliminated before his public trial and not allowed legal representation at the Warren Commission hearings, exculpatory evidence and witnesses such as Tom Robinson were routinely ignored. Tom Robinson is a disturbing example of key evidence and witnesses dismissed, ignored, altered, or suppressed by the Warren Commission to frame Lee Harvey Oswald as the lone assassin of JFK. Thank you.